Welcome to Uncomfortable, conversations about culture and Christianity. My name is Eric, and today I'm joined by Rachel.
Hey, y'all.
And Mackenzie.
Hello.
Welcome back. And Alex.
Hey, ya.
Hey, ya. Way to reference, just a classic Outkast song. Let's go ahead and shake it like a Polaroid picture as we continue this episode. What are you awing about? Do you not know what Polaroids are? They're the little photos that to develop them.
I feel like this episode just turned into dad jokes.
Hey, well, don't have a dad host the show then, okay? Yeah. Like, I know you did a good job and you're flexing now, and I get it. You are a better host than me. Well, everyone already agrees. The polls are in.
Polls are in. Yeah, I was literally at Burger King the other day, speaking of dad jokes, and as I was waiting for the guy to give me my food, he's like, they're still cooking the fries, just time for 2 dad jokes. And he told me 2 dad jokes, which was like great customer service. I thought it was, and they were
they good dad jokes? Yeah. Can you share?
They were definitely dad jokes. I don't remember them anymore, but it was kind of funny and a way to like pass the time and not be like, I hate them for taking too long to cook my French fries.
I really wanted to hear at least one dad joke, but I guess I already told one.
Yep, there we go. Let's move on.
All right. Today we're talking about bullying, and I feel like Rachel right away just started off bullying me, so this is appropriate. I'm just kidding, Rachel. It's fine. I'm not hurt. No, but this is in the news recently because of an Australian kid who has dwarfism. His name is Quaden Bayles. His mom posted this video about him being bullied, and he's crying and threatening to kill himself, among other things. And she's kind of saying, hey, this is what bullying does to kids. I want parents to see this. And kind of the aftermath of that is a comedian who also has the same type of dwarfism as Quaden launched a GoFundMe, and it's raised hundreds of thousands of dollars at this point. Saying all that not to get anyone to go to GoFundMe and donate right now. That's not what the point of this is, but really we're kind of wanting to just dive into bullying in general. I think it's a hot button issue. People talk about it a lot. I'm sure all of us were bullied at one, not boiled, bullied at one time. But yeah, let's kind of talk a little bit about this. Who saw the Quaden video? I know before we started, a couple of you mentioned you saw it, but you didn't watch it. Like, you know of it,
right?
Didn't want the sad feels. So what's everybody's kind of knowledge of how this all went down?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely scrolled by it a couple times on Facebook, just people reposting it. And I think as soon as I see stuff like that, I don't want to watch it because I know what it's about, and I get really upset when I see stuff like that. And so I just couldn't watch the whole thing. But I did see what was going on, and I thought it was very interesting. I would never expect like a parent to video their child while they're, I don't know, saying these things or like being so like vulnerable and like, threatening, suicide on themselves and stuff. And just like, it just was kind of shocking to me. Very sad. So
yeah, didn't she say that she posted it because she wanted support from other people or something like that?
Yeah,
it's like she wanted other people to speak into it. But I kind of agree. I think it's kind of weird that she posted it. I mean, that's a vulnerable thing for your child. So
yeah.
And I think part of it too, knowing like the backstory, and I will admit, I originally saw it all happen, and then I'm sometimes skeptical of anything that blows up on the internet because I've reshared enough things that were wrong that I like always try to like do some research, and we've talked about the TMZ culture, and so I don't want to feed into that, putting wrong stuff out there. But even in our chat where we talk about what we're talking about, what's trending, I put something wrong out there because I started researching it, and some guy was like, no, this kid's not really 9, he's 18, he's taking advantage of everybody. And there was this whole conspiracy afterward where I'm like, we should talk about this, and I thought we were going to talk about how people take advantage of others. And then I did research, and that guy who put out the video was like, I'm wrong, the kid actually is 9. But all that to go back to, he was a part of a show before that was highlighting bullying.
Yeah.
And so I think because of that, his mom already knew there was some kind of an awareness out there, and there was people that were following them. He's had an Instagram following because of that. He's from Australia. And so I think she was just highlighting like an actual, because we talk about bullying, and I think it builds some empathy, you know, to see like the actual effects sometimes of like what's happening like to your kid. Because as a parent, you know, my kid, he's never been severely bullied like that, you know, but he's been hurt by other people or and things like that. And so to see like not just to see the emotion behind it, I think is what because I watched the video while I was like sitting waiting to pick up my son at school, and it was painful to watch, you know, and then it was painful for me to think that's fake. But then once it came out that it was real, it's heartbreaking.
I think you both mentioned Rachel McKenzie. You both mentioned that it was like why would she post this? And you know, I kind of had the same thought. And then one thing that's, I don't know, it's a little interesting, I guess, is that she's like technically his manager for things that like he does. Also, his sister is like an Instagram model. So I think the family is very familiar with how social media works and like how they can kind of take advantage of that. Not saying that that's necessarily what she did. I mean, I think she honestly wanted to raise awareness because, you know, her son was hurting. But I do think she knew how to kind of leverage like that she knew that video would work, I think, in other words. Maybe not to the extent that it did, but I think she knew what she was doing because of her experience with social media.
And I think, I mean, the outcome and the effect is that people are more aware of the impact that bullying has on people. I think a lot of times people who are bullied aren't necessarily super outspoken about the fact that they're bullied. Like they actually keep it to themselves a lot and don't really share. And I think that's the bigger thing is people keeping it to themselves and not really being open and honest about it until it gets so far that it's just to a point where maybe they are, you know, considering suicide or something like that. And I think maybe raising awareness that you should bring up these conversations with your kids or people that you know and just, hey, how are you doing? Are there things going on in your life? I think maybe that could be a positive outcome of this video.
The interesting thing was the Brad Williams, the comedian who started the GoFundMe, was started with a $10,000 goal to send him to Disney World or Disneyland. Yeah. Which, I mean, it's well surpassed that. So I guess he can go a few times.
Yeah, he can. That's good.
But I think a lot of people were like, oh, the family started this GoFundMe and they're trying to make money off of it. And it's like, well, no.
Yeah. And I think either way, it is, for me as a parent, like it brought an awareness this weekend of like, hey, you know, my kid's turning 7. He's in school every day. Like, I should probably have this conversation about what this looks like. I know he goes to Millard, and all Omaha over the last couple of years has adopted this hashtag Be Kind, which is really an anti-bullying type of message that they want to talk about with kids. But it made me think, we've talked about Be Kind and all that, but what does actually like bullying look like? And so for us, and then even on this podcast, like bullying's been around since, you know, after the garden, you know, people have bullied one another. It's just part of the sin nature of humanity. So it's one of those topics that at some point we're going to talk about probably on the podcast. And so right now, while people are thinking about it, I think there's good leverage to reflect ourselves on how it's impacted our lives, and then for others to be able to listen to that. So
you talked to your kid to find out if he was a bully or if he had been bullied?
I think both, you know, because I think in some ways he's the oldest and he's got 3 little sisters. And so I'm not trying to throw him under the bus by any means, but you know, there's times where he might, you know, because he's bigger and because he wants his way, start to like hurt them, or, you know, so what does that look like? What does that word look like? He's heard that word inside of his life, and vice versa. I want him to know if something's happening to him. Like he was even talking about like a kid punched him, you know, earlier in the week, you know, once we had this conversation, and I'm like, well, buddy, you don't like, did you do anything back? Did you know, like, and he didn't punch him back or anything, but I'm like, you don't have to, you need to talk to somebody. If that's happening, buddy, you need to like let your teacher know, you need to let mommy and daddy know. And so that it's not setting him up to feel like he can ever be that for someone. So it opened up the conversation, I guess, both sides of it. So
there's 2 things you don't want to find out about your kid at school: that they are either the bully or the smelly kid in class.
Yeah.
So hopefully neither of those came to light.
Yes, I didn't.
Okay, good.
So I think it's good to maybe talk about what is bullying, because when I hear bullying, I think that recently I've heard of people saying, "Oh, I'm being bullied," and then other people come back and they're like, "No, that's not bullying. You're not actually giving credit to what bullying is." And so when we talk about bullying, I looked it up. And it says an aggressive behavior or intentional harm doing by peers that is carried out repeatedly and involves an imbalance of power. So the key words in that being intentional harm doing, and then repeatedly, and then an imbalance of power. But there's also, on top of that, there's different types of bullying. And I think we kind of want to get into that as well. So maybe the idea that we think of when we think of bullying is physical harm. So people like physically harming you. But obviously, we also have cyberbullying. That is a big topic in our society right now. But then also what's called relational bullying. So I thought that was interesting that they made a distinction between direct bullying, which is threatening people, blackmailing them, stealing their things, physically hurting them. Relational bullying, which is more getting left out of parties. People don't invite you. They don't invite you to go on trips. People are ignoring you. People spreading lies. So it's a lot more relational. And then cyberbullying, which is obviously when people are online and they're talking bad about you, or they're posting embarrassing photos or doing things without your permission that are harming you. So when we talk about cyberbullying, do you guys have any experience with that?
Cyberbullying.
Or
I think it goes back into like what that means. And the pastor in me can't help but turn everything into an alliteration. So the definition that I turned into an alliteration is hurt, harm, or humiliate. Okay, so if you like alliteration,
Triple H.
Yeah, the Triple H, but
not the wrestler.
Anything that's when someone's trying to hurt you, harm you, or humiliate. But yeah, I think cyberbullying is a whole new world that I think a lot of people don't know about. And I don't know that so tell me if you think this is cyberbullying. I preached on Sunday at the church, and
I'm so excited to hear where this is going.
The church often tweets out quotes, and I don't usually pick what quote they put out, which is fine. And so I think we put out like I said that the church is a verb, that's what I said. And that it's not about a place, it's about who we are. And some guy, I don't even know the guy, a pastor from somewhere else, just like tweets, "Someone didn't go to Greek class," and just like calls me out on the internet. And I think with I would guess to try to humiliate me, inside of that. Like I didn't lose any sleep over it, and so, and maybe that gets into a little bit later, when someone wants to bully and if we allow them to bully and all that kind of stuff. But
I mean, that was a very minor case of bullying, if it is at all. That might have just been he wanted to start a conversation with you or something.
Well, I think that leads to another thing of like, I feel like a lot of people think like our millennials or like Gen Z, they're just so sensitive, like everything just hurts their feelings, like they can't take like criticism, they think that they're just being bullied. And I think that is kind of like a good conversation to have, because what is the difference between receiving critical feedback and then feeling like you're being bullied? Like I think that especially our generation, it's so easy to be like so easily offended by every little thing, especially with the movement of like being more welcoming and like open to like new things. And I can't think of the word where you're just like inclusive and like it's like our generation is moving towards that, and we want to be welcoming of everyone. But then I think maybe it leads off to another side of like you get so offended so easily by any little thing. And I see that a lot on like the internet, especially. It's just like someone posts their opinion and then you just are like, oh, they're bullying me. Like, I don't know. You just have to kind of figure out.
Well, I think if we're talking specifically about cyberbullying, like the extreme cases of that have led to very young children even committing suicide. So it's like that sort of thing is kind of on another level than, oh, this person disagreed with me. This is, you kind of touched on it, Mackenzie, when you mentioned specific attacks on people where they're posting pictures, they're criticizing them, their friends are ganging up on them. I've heard stories of Facebook groups getting made just to make fun of an individual at a school, and it leads to these things where you're hearing kids younger than even 13 years old who are taking their own lives because they don't know how to deal with this social like pressure and
Right.
abuse that they're experiencing. So yeah, I think when you're talking about cyberbullying, I think that's probably more what we're talking about when we say that term is like
Right.
these are extreme cases. These are not just disagreements or little feuds on the internet. This is someone's being singled out and actually hurt.
Well,
I
and
think
even-
sorry.
I was
All
just
of
going to
us
say
excited.
the Finstas. Do you guys know what a Finsta is?
No.
Have you heard of that term? I learned this recently. It's a fake Instagram.
Yep.
So people will have fake Instagrams where they go on and maybe they only allow so many people to see it, and they
or
just
Finsta, second Instagram.
okay. And then
Our Finsta,
so only
third
certain people
Instagram.
can see it. Not everybody can access it.
Yeah.
And they just bash people and just talk. Or they use it for other reasons to hide things from
Wasn't
their
there?
family members.
This is a rabbit hole I'm about to go on. But wasn't there like a famous athlete who got busted for having a fake Twitter account and like
Yeah, there's been owners of,
Yeah.
of teams.
Okay.
And
Well, and I think that was what I was going to say is like with the cyberbullying, it's given people a whole new world to kind of go into and feel like they're not actually the person doing the harm or like,
Yeah.
I mean, they are, but they can kind of hide behind the online kind of thing because like, especially when I was in high school, you know, Facebook and those kind of things were kind of getting more popular. And that's where a lot of people would go. Like, I would say I was a little bit bullied in high school because of my hair. And, like, I didn't know how to... If you've seen my hair, it gets kind of crazy. It looks like an afro sometimes if you don't control it right. And people would go on Facebook and message me and just say things about my hair. Just be like, oh, you know, blah, blah, blah. Just constantly. But Facebook messaging is such an easy way to go because teachers aren't going to see it. Parents aren't going to see it. It's private messaging. No one else on the internet is going to see it. I think just phones and cyberbullying just makes it so much easier for people to take that step of just kind of bullying someone.
yeah, that's a huge point of, you know, previously I think it was in school that you maybe opened up your kids to bullying and in less controlled environments. But yeah, there's literally people that are creating you can create a new phone number essentially with a lot of text apps and just flood somebody with you know, texts, and they can't even block the numbers fast enough or
Right.
flood people with DMs and not even know where it's coming from. And so you can get mad at somebody. And then like I've heard of, you know, working in student ministry of cases of this where, you know, a kid did something wrong or has been bullied and they just parents have to take away their kid's phone
Yeah.
to protect them because, you know, people just keep following them and they make their accounts private, and then, you know, they'll get text messages on their phone and it's just endless and constant and you can't escape it, you know, inside of that. And so I think that's where the difference is. You used to be able to at least leave it at school maybe, or leave it on your team, or leave it, you know, and you were safe at home. But with these devices that are in our pockets and our accounts on everything, you can't just leave it at home or you know, or leave it at school. It follows you home. And so that's a whole different world. And I think really a lot of it ties into that lie that we're all sold as kids, you know, that I'd rather have sticks and stones.
Or sticks and stones.
Sticks and stones
break my bones.
Yeah, but words will never hurt me.
Yeah.
And so that's such a lie.
Yeah, and I was going to touch on that a little bit because I feel like growing up, it was easy for my parents to be like, well, you know, and this was like, and I feel like this is just the easy response. Well, just ignore it, or just they just are being mean because, you know, they don't like you, so just ignore it, or like they're, you know, jealous of you, so they just want to be mean and kind of put you down, so just brush it off. But like I think maybe that response is not the healthiest response when you hear that someone is being bullied, because it's clearly making an impact on them, and it has deeper impact than we think. Just you can brush it off. So I think maybe even our response to people who are being bullied should maybe look a little different.
Yeah. And as a kid, you just can't understand that.
Right.
Like you can't understand, like I as a parent know, okay, there's probably something happening in their home life. They're maybe being bullied or hurt by their parent. Like there's studies that, you know, show hurt people. But as a kid, you just don't understand that. You can't cognitively understand that. And so
it's just in the heat of the moment, you're feeling, you know, my mom would say, oh, they're just jealous of your bolo tie.
Yeah.
But it's one of those things where like when I was a kid in like middle school and high school, I didn't have social media. That wasn't. So now I'm
Right.
like almost wondering, like, wait, were kids actually meaner then? Because they would just say this stuff to my face. Like they wouldn't do it with anonymity. They'd just come up to me and say it. And I don't know.
Right.
It's one of those things where it's. Yeah, it is scary because I think with the anonymity, they can layer it on so much thicker. Then they can also gang up on you, and people don't have to feel any, like they don't have to fear any repercussions. So.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, where the power comes into play, because I think that's why a lot of times people get into positions where bullying continues, is because it's somebody that's maybe in power or has leverage on them in some way. So maybe it's the cool kid at school, and like if they find out that I told my parents or I told my teacher, then you're just afraid of the onslaught that's going to continue to happen, or what happens if that happens, then they hurt me more. And so usually people don't tell because they're trying to protect themselves, or maybe if it is a parent, like they don't feel like they can tell if a parent's bullying them because they're afraid of what's going to happen, what are the repercussions, and they think by staying silent that's actually protecting them from more pain and suffering inside of the house, which is I think why a lot of people continue to get bullied. And when we're young and when we are trying to do the best that we can, and somebody has a power over us, if they're manipulating us or whatever, we want to be the cool kid, we want to feel like we have power, then someone lording power over us it's so powerful in our lives, because we see them as influential, and we don't want to give into that.
Well, and there's power in numbers too, because I think even I've experienced both sides of things, because I have bullied people and when I was in high school, and like it's like so easy to group up with what everyone else is saying. If one person or two people are talking about it, oh, can you believe they did that, or like we're gonna not invite them to things and exclude them. Well, you don't want to be on their bad side and not be excluded or be excluded and not be a part of their group or whatever. So it's so easy especially a kid or a teenager to just quickly be like, oh yeah, okay, yeah, you're right. That way you're included. And so, yeah, I've been on both sides of it, and it's just that, like the power, or just like the need to be wanted or valued, I guess.
Yeah. And you wonder like the long-term effects of bullying, where, I mean, I look at my own life and I go, okay, I think there's certain characteristics that probably built up, whether it's a callus over my heart on certain issues or things like that, where it's like I feel like maybe I'm a little tougher because of it. Maybe I'm better off because of it, whatever. I can try to justify those things. I think about my own kids they go to a Christian school, and they haven't had to experience too much bullying. I mean, there's small isolated accounts, but nothing like what I remember, at least. But I hear like horror stories of public school bullying and these things that are just kind of crazy. And then I wonder, like, where's the balance of it all too? Because it's like sometimes maybe, like, would I be the person I was if I wasn't bullied the way I was in school? Like, I don't know. Maybe I'd be. I don't know. You just don't know.
And I think it's funny. It makes me think of a funny story, because I don't think you realize how impacted you are sometimes, and then a situation happens and it just like kind of triggers that. Like, so with my hair, this is funny because this is a story about Alex.
Man.
When I was first starting out as a resident, I came into one of our meetings and I had my hair like up in a bun on the top of my hair, and Alex was like, wow, you have a lot of hair, or whatever. It wasn't even like trying to be offensive or rude or anything, but I know, but it triggers those things because you've had that history of people focusing on that one part of you and just being so negative about it. And so it is funny because I think you just don't realize how much it has impacted your view of certain things until maybe later on you have those moments where it just triggers that.
Yeah, I'm the kid with a butt chin, so if you don't know what that is. And so like
it's called a cleft chin.
Yeah, I know, but that's just what people, they noticed, about you as a kid, and like you're like as an adult, I'm like, that's so silly, but there's been times like all my kids inherited that, and I'm like, I feel bad for them, especially my daughters, because I'm like, no, people are gonna make fun of that and be like, oh, you should wipe the butt on your face, and like all those which are silly things. But
it's hurtful.
Yeah, it is. As hurtful. A kid, you're like, you just can't separate that. And so there's parts of me, even as an adult, like I know that's a prominent feature of me, and it builds insecurities inside of you and all of those kind of things. And so, yeah, it's amazing the the long-term effects that can happen, both positive and negative. But then there's almost a celebration that some people do of their being bullied. Like there's like, I love my haters. You know, there's like this movement where like people are like, thank you haters, you got me here. And I think that's almost a negative thing in some ways too, because it's celebrating, like inviting that more. And just, I think it is that callous, like, I don't really care what people have to say about me. I'm going to act like nobody can ever hurt me. And I'm this invincible person.
Hashtag butt chin for life.
Yeah. Hashtag butt chin for like life, butt chin for like,
yeah.
I need to stop talking.
It's true. But I understand what you're saying. It's one of those things where they're coming at it from an angle because you kind of have to. Like, I think you notice people who sometimes are the most abrasive in their personalities are probably the people who've like been bullied the most because they just have this guard up and they're just like, you know what, I'll be mean to myself to protect myself. Like I'll say worse things to me than you can even think of, just as like a safety mechanism.
Yeah.
I do think sometimes we like to oversimplify bullying in this sense where it's like, okay, yeah, we talk about, you know, like I could talk about the fact that my maiden name is Potter. And so people always made fun of me about Harry Potter. But in my mind, I don't really equate that with bullying because, and I think it goes with like, you know, when you're a kid, that's like the worst thing in the world. Like, how dare you make fun of me? I want to be accepted. But then as I get older, all of a sudden, and I never read any of the books growing up just because I was like, you know, boycotting that. But then when I got to high school, like late high school, I realized, wait a second, this actually isn't a big deal at all. And then I started watching the movies and now I'm a big fan, right? So your perception of what matters changes as you get older and maybe you realize, wait, they weren't actually picking on me. There's nothing wrong with me. But I do think there's also the other side of it where people are legitimately physically bullied sometimes, and when you see that thing like that happening to somebody that you love and then you see how that affects them as they grow up, I mean, studies show that bullying can actually have a negative impact on your health. If you were bullied as a child, when you grow older into adulthood, you can still have effects on your health, including like anxiety, depression, even like headaches, stomach aches, sleeping problems. All of those things can contribute to, those can be a result of the bullying that you received when you were a kid. And I think that probably has to do with just the trauma. I mean, that's what comes to mind for me is just the trauma of experiencing that, being targeted, probably in more of the serious bullying cases that people have, more physical. Not to say that cyberbullying isn't serious, because I know that, kind of like you said, even for me, that wasn't as big of a deal when I was growing up. But I did have, you know, maybe family members or friends that experienced those things. And I have seen that really impact them even into adulthood.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. It's, I don't know that I think every generation's going to handle it a little differently. They're going to, you know, say it's just the way life is or whatever. But I think now that we, you know, as technology is more prevalent, we have to try to work our way through it and try to figure it out.
Well, yeah, and I think we do throw the term around loosely at times. Like I know even right now there's like a political ad running, you know, about they're throwing around the word bully, whether our president is a bully or not. And I think it's like Mike Bloomberg that's running it. And this has nothing to do with yes or no, it's right. But we do like throw it around as if like, yeah, maybe someone is bullying because they're in power, or maybe they're not, but it's just kind of like, okay, laissez-faire, like it's not that big of a deal, and it does diminish, you know, times where this is a real thing happening in someone's life, or like we're like, yeah, we've all been bullied, but maybe not to the extent of someone else, and so we just kind of push it off. Like I've watched, you know, those What Would You Do shows, and where it's like, you know, they've got the hidden cameras, and someone's like actually being bullied, and it's amazing and sad how many like people feel like they can't step in or refuse to step in when they watch something like this happening, even like physical bullying that like is clear and they make it as obvious as possible, or even bullying like degrading like, you know, a husband to a wife at a public place. And how many people just allow that to happen inside of our society because we're afraid to like step up. And I think that's where, you know, part of our calling as Christians and knowing our identity is, even if we're not contributing to the problem, sometimes our sin is in omission, you know? And so, I mean, and yeah, so sometimes our sin is not responding. We see something that's clear there that isn't right. There's that feeling in our gut that that's not right, but we were like, I shouldn't get involved in that. And so sometimes there's that sin of not jumping in, or not when we see something, or at least de-escalating problems inside of that. And so I think as believers in Jesus, like our job is to stand up for those that are vulnerable. Our job is to support those who are orphans and widows and in vulnerable situations in our lives. But sometimes our fear and our own self-preservation keeps us from stepping into those things. And so I think that's a hard thing. There's been times in my life where I've seen that happen, but I just don't jump in because I'm afraid of, and I just care more about myself really than about something else. I'm like, somebody else will fix that problem.
Yeah.
Have you guys ever been there where you've like witnessed or like been in that kind of situation where you're like, yeah, I think maybe something's going on. I have a feeling, I've seen it, I've heard it, but I'm just I don't want to involve myself in that.
I think my thought is kind of going into one of our next questions. Do people still bully as an adult? I kind of, when I was researching this, read about office bullying, and I was trying to remember through the jobs I've had, have I ever seen office bullying, and what would that even look like? And I don't want to deny that it happens, because I'm sure it happens. And I mean, at some point, you just kind of assume that people grow into adults, but not every adult acts like an adult, right? And so I think definitely it probably happens. I have not witnessed that in a workplace setting, but I guess when you're talking about like our responsibility as Christians, we need to be aware of that even as adults, because people around us could be coming into contact with that. I definitely, not to go back to cyberbullying, but too much, but to talk about Twitter culture, when you see people, like, it's one thing to disagree with somebody, but it's another thing when it kind of makes me think of cancel culture, when everybody is like attacking you and targeting you. I think that can even be a form of bullying that we as even adults like to join into and cancel people per se. But
yeah, I think the thing with adults, I heard somebody say one time that as adults we still have like childlike behaviors, but we just do a better job of covering them up and making them seem more appropriate for the, like, you know, society. So it's like we still have like, you know, tantrums, but, you know, we're better at covering them up and like making it look, you know, not as, you know, like we're freaking out as much. And, you know, we still bully, but we can cover it up and make it a little more like appropriate for society. And I think that's so true. I think we, you know, still have some qualities that kids have that we've just learned to control a little bit better, and maybe even direct a little bit more. It's almost more sneaky, and like, I just think it can be worse sometimes, because you're so much better at like maybe saying a little offhanded comment, but you are trying to hurt or humiliate someone slowly, but like not really like straight up saying it to someone's face, but you're just kind of making these offhanded comments, hoping that they're gonna like kind of feel that pain a little bit. And I think adults definitely bully, you know, just in a different form, I would say.
Yeah. And I think specifically in the church, I think bullying happens. Like I, you know, have been a part of churches, even growing up. Like I remember I've been a part of like some smaller churches, and that were, you know, good churches. I'm happy. But like I grew up in Omaha, for example, and, you know, we kind of had it out for big churches, you know, even like a church like Christ Community. Like if you would ask me when I was like 12 if I'd work at Christ Community, I'd be like, no, because they water down the gospel, and they're only big because they, you know, they're sellouts, and they're not actually preaching the true gospel, and they're not talking about holiness and all this kind of stuff. And so sometimes in the church we begin to bully one another, maybe not directly to them, but we start to create these stigmas, and we create this rhetoric around somebody else. And so maybe we're not actually like bullying to a person, but I think spreading lies and creating deceit and creating a bad image of somebody else. Maybe we're not directly hurting them or stomping on them or doing those things, but we're creating a stigma, a gossip about somebody that's not true, which is hurting that person's reputation, whether they know it or not. And so I think inside of the church, we do that a lot of times, maybe to other churches, and really we are bullying not just people, we're bullying Jesus and his bride in some ways by hurting one another and saying negative things about one another. And so I think it's one of those things we have to be cognizant of as believers in our desire to one up one another, or say why our congregation locally is better and more theologically correct, or our pastors are better, or all those kind of things. I think it creeps into the church, and it's one of Satan's tools to build disunity inside of the church. And so,
well, even within the church, not necessarily towards other churches, but like, I feel like, quote unquote, spiritual maturity is a power that people can tend to use in order to manipulate people to do things, or kind of say, well, they're not as mature, or they've only, known the Lord for a year, so I don't think that we should allow them to do this or this or this. But I think the reality is we're all believers who have the same Holy Spirit inside of us. And if we're not treating each other like that, and we're kind of using these power, things just to, I don't know, kind of target people or not allow them to do things, I think you can see that inside the church as well.
And I mean, this kind of applies. I guess I grew up in a church that very much believed that the only evidence of the Holy Spirit at work in your life was speaking in tongues. And so that became such an easy thing for people to bully others on. Like, oh, well, no, you haven't spoken tongues. Okay, well, you're not there yet. So keep trying. And it's one of those things where it's like you said, as an adult, you don't even realize that this is what these people are doing, but they're bringing people down, they're hurting people, and they're taking a position of power over them because of something they think they have.
Yeah, trying to create shame in anybody's life, I think, is a litmus test of it. Am I bullying them? Am I trying to create shame inside of life? And the crazy thing about the gospel and Jesus is he was somebody who had all the power in the world. Like he could have bullied a lot of people throughout his life, and yet we see that he laid down his life. He took on the form of a servant. In Philippians 2, it talks all about like where Jesus was, all the authority that he had in being God in the flesh, but yet he chose to consistently and constantly take the form of a lesser than a servant, even becoming man. His humanity was an example of how Jesus did that. And so sometimes for us as believers, especially who are wanting to be more like Jesus, that's what discipleship looks like, following and becoming more like Jesus. That's one of the things that we have to, I think, a posture we have to take is, am I trying to power up? Is this about me getting to a next level, or am I taking on the form of a servant? And I think if you want to never be a bully again, and you want to look more like Jesus, probably err on serving others. And so, because I think it happens in my marriage, it happens as a parent, subtly I can become a bully without even realizing it, where, as a husband, I can bully my wife, and maybe I wouldn't look at it like that. But when I'm choosing not to serve her and I'm trying to make her subservient to me and powering up on her, that's ultimately what I'm doing to her.
Yeah, and I think it's so cool that in the Bible we see over and over and over again this pattern of God or Jesus choosing the weaker people, or choosing the people that are seen as less than or weird or different, and make raising them up and loving them. And I just think that is so cool that we can see that as Christians, and hopefully try and follow that within our society.
Yeah, I think another thing to keep in mind too is just practical ways for us to identify bullying, practical ways for us to, whether it's adults, whether it's kids. I know that one of the things I try to do with my kids, it's not saying I'm some sort of ideal parent you need to follow, but I do try to talk to them about that stuff all the time. Like, especially if I see it, like, okay, what are like when they start to pick on a certain trait or something that's a little different from someone, it's like, okay, let's talk about it. Why is it this way? What's the differences? Why, I think, and a lot of times we got to look at ourselves. We got to go, okay, like, this is how I'm different. Look at these things that someone could easily pick on me for this thing, and just kind of walk through those things. And also ask, like, look for warning signs. Like, maybe it's not just kids, right? Like, you can maybe see if your kids are being bullied, but like maybe you have a good friend who's, being hurt. I mean, there's like you mentioned, Alex, I think there's domestic bullying. Like, there's, husbands and wives can be hurting each other. There's just things to look for. And I think we do have to be bold about that stuff. We can't just kind of try to brush it aside. We have to be bold in the way we act.
Yeah.
And there are people that I think that there's obvious differences maybe in their makeup or whatever. I think like that's part of Quaden, his situation. He's got dwarfism, and so there's an obvious difference versus him and the rest of society that sometimes we have to even be able to say that out loud. For my kids, like I've got a daughter who just got cochlear implants, and she's a little 1-year-old girl with like 2 little microphones on her head, and she's going to have that for the rest of her life. And she's got glasses, she's really cute. And at this age, a lot of people think it's cute, but we're talking to her older siblings even now about, hey, there's going to be people that are going to point at your sister, laugh at your sister, do things like that. And not because they're just mean people, but because they're just ignorant to it. It's different. Most people don't walk around with that obvious, part of their life. And so people are going to be different. And so learning to help her shape her identity is a big thing for us to help her not take that as bullying, because it's just going to happen. And so the more we can even say that out loud to her and to her siblings and speak life into her identity and let her identity come from Christ. And so we've read some books on that over the last few weeks that people have given us on just how do we set them up to protect their sister, because they're not going to notice it. We're so self-absorbed that we might not even notice that's hurting them. And my kids might even have some of those questions about why is she different? Why can't she hear? All those things. And so I think the more we can speak a positive, true identity as well into our kids and speak life into them, the less susceptible maybe we become to bullying in some ways. Doesn't mean it's never going to happen. It doesn't mean we can totally protect them. But I think one of those ways is telling them truths about them, so when lies get fed to them, they can defend lies with truth.
I think take it seriously too when you hear someone comes to you, or kid or adult, anybody, like don't just brush it off. Like take it seriously.
You have to take it seriously.
Investigate and include the right people.
Yeah.
Does anybody else have anything they want to just put a bow on this conversation? No, everybody feel good about it. It's another one of those subjects that are, sometimes easy to brush off as, it's not really an issue. But I think that you need to take every, thing seriously, and especially if it's someone close to you. All right. Well, that does it for us today. Thanks everybody for being here. Thanks for listening wherever you might be. If you want to reach out to us on social media, you can do that at CCC Omaha, or you can send us an email if you'd like to contact us directly. That's podcast@cccomaha.org. We'd love to hear from you. Until next time, we'll talk to you then. And, don't bully anybody, okay?